InnerQuest explores various pathways through which you can connect with the infinite wisdom of the universe and apply it to personal, professional, and spiritual growth. This program, featuring accomplished practitioners, educators, and authors, is provided by Infinity Foundation, an innovative center for holistic studies and research. We invite you to share this journey with us.
Hello, welcome to InnerQuest. My name is Jay Stone, your host for today, and our guest is John Lionberger. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Jay.
John, after spending nearly 30 years in business, is a former agnostic who is ambushed by God in the wilderness, now takes people of any faith, and often enough, no faith, into the wilderness on canoe and kayak trips for spiritual renewal and spiritual exploration.
Right.
And John is also the author of this book, Renewal in the Wilderness. So tell our audience, John, what exactly is renewal in the wilderness? What exactly do you do that allows people to renew themselves? Well,
I do take people into the wilderness on camping trips. They're fairly benign camping trips. And they last between 1 day, which is just really the whiff of the cork of what's possible, if you get the wine analogy, to 3 days, to a week. And the week-long trips, we go to some really remarkable places. But the clients that come with me are generally middle-aged, and some have been older. And so being in a canoe or a kayak, you don't have to be in terrific shape to do this, and so therefore we can go deeply into the wilderness.
Where do you go? What are some of the places you go to?
Well, the week-long trips, we go to the Rio Grande in Texas for canoeing, a little bit of whitewater, and you get a real sense of desert spirituality. We go to Lake Powell in Utah for sea kayaking, although it's lake kayaking. We go to the Apostle Islands in Wisconsin for sea kayaking. We go to the Boundary Waters for canoeing up in northern Minnesota, and then for 3-day trips we'd go down the Wisconsin River, and on the 1-day trips they're quite local.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of feedback do you get from people who go on these trips?
Well, tremendous feedback mostly, and not everybody is affected the same way, but I will say that very few people are not affected by it at all. Some people have changed their jobs because they've discovered that their work life does not emulate what they want their spiritual lives to look like. I've had a fair number of agnostics and probably some atheists come on the trips for the adventure, understanding that they were spiritual in nature, the trips are, and only one of those people has not then understood that there is something bigger out there than we are, and whether they call it God or something bigger than we are or whatever they choose to call it, they get a sense that truly we're not in this alone and something made this. And they've begun to explore their spiritual traditions, if they had traditions. But they've all, with the exception of this one person, have begun to explore their spiritual lives.
Now, who outfits these trips?
Well, if they're on the Wisconsin River, I'll use people along the Wisconsin River. For 2 of the trips, I'll use the Northwest Passage, which is based in Wilmette, because they take their kayaks elsewhere. On some of the other trips, I've used Outward Bound, the one on the Rio Grande and the one on the Yellowstone River.
Now, I've gone on canoe trips from anywhere from 1 day to a week, and we carry all the supplies in the canoe. Right. Is that what you're doing, or do you just, have like a vehicle that moves the tents and the foods downstream as you go?
No, we are completely, as much as possible, self-sufficient. We take everything that we need.
And what do you do for inclement weather? Because that's, you can't plan, you say you want to make God laugh, try and plan something.
That's right.
Which is part of it.
Right. Well, I give them a complete gear list. They understand that there could be terrible weather, and sometimes there is, but if they follow the gear list, then they're prepared. And we have good tents, and a hopeful requisite is a good sense of humor and an understanding that we don't control what happens out there. We can't flip a switch and the weather goes up or the weather goes down.
And what are some of the things on your gear list?
Well, certainly good rain gear.
Yeah.
Quick dry clothing, and that is non-cotton, so that when cotton gets wet, it just stays wet, and you can get hypothermic with that. So I recommend no cotton at all. They have to bring their own sleeping bags and their own sleeping mats. I cannot provide those, but they bring their own toiletries, their own sunscreen, and anything of a personal nature like that. Certainly their own medications.
You ever run into bears or snakes or anything like that along the way?
I've seen one snake in the 7 years I've been doing this professionally, and that actually is the only snake I've seen in the years and years and years. That
Was it a venomous snake?
No, it wasn't. No. And I've been ripped off by bears, but I've never seen a bear. I've been backpacking in Alaska for a month, and I never saw a bear at all. I was very disappointed.
How long ago did you backpack in Alaska?
8 years ago, up through the mountains.
So is this what led to your career change?
No, that was training for this career change. Do you want me to talk about what led to it?
Sure.
All right. For a very significant birthday, at a time in my life where my work had stopped fulfilling me.
What kind of work did you do?
I was in the broadcasting business and the cable business. I brought Cable News Network to the Midwest years ago, and then
were you like an executive?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was a very interesting career. But as people go down life's glide path, I think often they find that work doesn't fulfill them the way they thought it would when they start out. And so I was in a midlife crisis, I'm sure, and my wife called Outward Bound, and she said, my husband is having a birthday. What is the hardest trip you have? And they said, oh, well, it's dog sledding in northern Minnesota at the beginning of February, and we sleep outside, and it goes to 40 below.